So taking a few deep breaths in and out, and just welcome yourself back to center, back home. From your heart space, just breathe in and open up a space. And from the top of your head, bring it all the way down your consciousness and feel that sinking into the heart space center. From there, you can opt to have your eyes closed or open. And I'd like to hear you say these words out loud. In a world of only thinking to face, the greatest fear is to open up to love and embrace this feeling with every deep breath in as we come to know this day unfolding through the perspective of these words that we believe to be truth and filter through them, that they come together to make up this statement, to reaffirm throughout the day for your reality, to see it in this way. And let's say it as many times throughout the day. Repeat this and say it out loud. Make a note of it. Taking a deep breath in and out. In a world of only thinking to face, the greatest fear is to open up to love. In a world of only thinking to face, the greatest fear is to open up to love. In a world of only thinking to face, the greatest fear is to open up to love. And sometimes this is exactly the intensity of this fear that brings us back to love again, that it's so outrageously unreal that it wakes us up from the program, no matter how much of a crisis the opportunity it brings from it for us to start and reawaken to this love and open up to a brand new world. How it dissolves this thing, this illusion, this false evidence that appears to be real. In the face of love, it disintegrates. No longer is it there. No longer can it be felt. As a matter of fact, we start to giggle of how we were taking it so serious before, into this place, into this realm of fear that kept us there in the intensity of being serious about it. and how much it really is not. And when we take things to that extreme of being serious, the opposite, when we let go, we become enlightened and we can feel the love again. And how much fun it is. You see, we realize when we were on that level and what level we're on and how we can play in that game of fear from a different level and how much fun it can be. But really, this is what continues the loop of fear when others are on the other level, on the higher level, resonating, and they control the others who are down there in the fear, in the belief, in the stories that they give them. And it's fun. It's almost like playing chicken, like bluffing each other, until it's like, oh no. And, sometimes we get pulled down because we're just playing others in this way. And we become, so involved by it and the amusement of it. So when we entertain, like they say, if you entertain something long enough, it becomes real. And so it could be fun and okay, and we're playing tricks and all these things and games with each other. But if we start taking it serious and we start relying on it and expecting to be disconnected so that we can control others with it, then it's no longer a fun game anymore when others are suffering because of it. So we're not here to be doing these things, and yet we're still entertained by it for some reason. And that's what holds us back into that. And we keep that space open for others to play in, this recreating a false illusion, if you will, a hell. And once we let go of it globally as a mass, as collective, then it will no longer exist in our world. So it's as simple as that, really. And so just remind yourself throughout the day. It might not make any sense at all. Like, is what she talking about in the world of only thinking to face the greatest fear? Is to open up to love. I mean, there's only so much thinking you can do, right? Eventually, it hits you with a 2x4 and you open up to love. Or you simply don't exist at all. In order to exist, you have to feel. And to feel from the deepest lower density levels is to feel pain, but then eventually we feel the love. Love is like hope. It penetrates through the lowest, darkest places, and we can feel it even when there's no light there, even when there's no consciousness there, that we are aware of this thing called love. It is there. So love, hope, can reach the depths of density in no matter what created hell we have accepted in our world. And just like forgiveness, love will help us there. So, as we go into lower and lower densities, things become distorted, and the meanings of the names and the labels and all these other things that we kind of try to proof and make sense of from our opinions in the collective, the lower we go, the more distorted they become, to the point of the exact opposite, which is the polarities, and that hold that gap, the in between, that adventure, that journey from one point to the other. It's like our final destination. Once we reach that, then the gap is closed, and then we go on to something else. And we work through that, and then through something else. And so this here is like a yin and yang concept. In the world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. And it's a paradox. And so when we do absorb it well enough, it will help us work throughout all those nonsensical things that become a burden, perhaps, or whatever it is we have to work through. And we realize that whatever we thought of, plan B, plan C, to divert us and distract us from the actual goal of plan A, and why always plan C comes to fruition, or plan B, or the variation of those poles, and why not plan A, is because we've been making all these other backup plans. And through my experience, I found that they were always coming to fruition and not the actual goal, because I was making backup plans for what ifs and what in just in case, and the liabilities and the insurances and the monies and the insecurities that play upon us, and the doubts. It's like writing an exam, and we get it right the first time, but then we get like, oh, maybe that's not the answer. And then we get it wrong because we go to something else because we're not sure. And then we pick C instead of A. For example, there's many. And so this affirmation, this activation for the day will get you going. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. They say resistance is futile. Eventually, it will crack you open, or you will crack it open. And that's the difference of whether you recycle and leave this physical containment that your spirit is having an experience with, this vehicle, or it cracks you open and you leave. Or rather, yes, that's what it means to die. Because your soul, it never dies, your consciousness. And those two, when they meet and they become into this human form as a spirit having an experience, and not are you experienced and living in the life of the death cult that tries to prove itself with the ghosts from the past and what it's already done in its footprints. Rather, the experiences that unfold and that you dance with, the unfolding of the divine, to experience every moment by moment as it moves you and you move it, inspirational, motivational, and every moment is an experience unlike before. And so in this present moment is all that matters. What we have already done as a record keeping is already in the ethers. Even before we go to do it, it's already there, that probability. Just like we've already done it, it's already there, that experience. So are we experienced to say that? You're not really living. Are you alive? Are you alive? Are you experiencing this moment? Or are you experiencing something that already happened that is not in the awareness of that refreshing moment by moment that you have lived, but are not living it at this present moment? And what you're going to live again, you just allow it. You don't try to control it by disconnecting from yourself. And so this is the difference between the inverted and what it means to play with mirrors and the expectations of the mirrors that have on us, and how much we rely on these things, that we form relationships to relate with others, and how they resonate with us, and the importance of the relevance that we hold, and the experience that we lose out on life, the life, our life force, this sovereign being, this light, this childlike, playful presence. And so when we go and we become more serious into the death cult of it all, then we are on the thinking, in the thinking, in the thinking, in the believing of this thing called fear. And we start to feel it. And we start to feel it. We become that illusion that we feel this fear. And what this fear does to us, it closes our heart. First thing that happens is the breathing. And you go into panic mode, and you strain and stress yourselves. And so let's continue on with today's sermon. So, what does fear feel like to you? And leverage that out with one pole, and then the other pole being love, and the two polarities. Sometimes people think the opposite of love is hate, and then go into that and feel that, study it. Is it not derived from fear and a disconnect of the self? So work through it. How does it feel? And the in between, that gap that creates. So when you bring the two poles, the polarities together, it closes the illusion. It cancels out. At first, you have to learn all the lessons in between, these experiences that perhaps might be borrowed from our lineage all the way down, our family tree, our environment, the time and place that surrounds us, from our circumstances that are the symptoms created from the state of being, and how we change it through going back again, our state of being, through how we feel. Or we can play with how we think, like in these affirmations. But these affirmations that we've experienced up to now have really not always in the way that we expect them to be, where the mind convinces us to feel a certain way through the experiences of the words that we reaffirm and the affirmations that we're used to, that we play with, really don't always work in the way if we don't work through these things first. And so, in a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. The unconscious mind is very smooth to promote and is part of the vegetative nervous system of the body of the self. So, how the nervous system interprets things and how our thoughts are made to convince us otherwise. We can play with that back and forth. Mostly the affirmation for the day is the highlight of the sermon that expresses and the point that it makes as we continue on. Expressing the meaning of how the many variations come to be in this ascension process of the physical level. For the self to connect with the involuntary function is at the highest of authority to sustain life for it. When this function stops, so does everything else of the self. And here it is where it gets tricky, that the medical field has altered through experiment with chemically synthesized substances, the balance to maintain harmony can temporarily restore with life from the outside in rather than the inside out. So relying on the external, and yet evolved enough now to get us inoculated from the inside out through our memories, this thing called RNA, and our genetic imprints through our DNA. Sympathetic dissonance is this lack of inner harmony, and from the disconnect, anything from the outside of the self does provide for the senses, this 5 sense world reality that we come to think as being real. And nothing from the outside ever lasts, and thus never really a reliable source to cognitively devote as worship. And the adoration that the self seeks to find from the outside or sexual gratification is all from the inner peak of parasympathetic resonance, automatic nervous system. So when we start to bombard that system, we disconnect to the point of dumbing down and weakening our immune system, then things will be allowed to enter, and we will fight and feel the symptoms of a flu, of just rejecting it, just pulsating it out. And we get fever from the fighting that our white blood cells do perform. We have an army from the inside, and when we try to synthetically alter all these things, we're breaking down our very own defense. A war starts to infest and inside of us, like we would having a war on the outside, how you see armies fighting the polarities one against the other, and in hopes of a relief to close this gap. And this is what we call, on a spiritual war-like level, we must do the inner work. And when we expect the external to do it for us in the form of cheat sheets that are chromatin and chromosome level of DNA and our genes, that we may correct it from the outside to create it on a synthetic level, genetically modifying what we ingest as proteins that may also make up the stranded helixes that make up the DNA, and all these proteins and codons and all that information that again becomes distorted, just like different words, just like these affirmations that we put together, and we can reassemble the words to make other sentences. The same with our genomes, the same with our DNA, and then we can re-inject it artificially back like a computer system, and eventually evolve into a hybrid version of ourselves, a digital copy of ourselves, where we can also robotically replace our physical body, that others and other things can do the work for us, and artificial intelligence can merge with us. And these are like artificial limbs and prosthesis, and the list goes on, even when it comes to procreating. And where do we, there is no end to this, and we just keep going, just like crutches. Eventually we have to learn how to do it on our own without that artificial intelligence. If we rely on it too much, it will enslave us like anything else. So let's keep going. And with a sympathetic resonance of profound exhilaration and inspiration, joy, peace, and sense of well-being, the self can tap into the sense of connectedness, bliss, and ecstasy through this automatic nervous system. To disconnect from it and have something else control it other than yourself connecting to it on a spiritual inner work that we're expected to do, because it's like we're missing out on whatever work we came here to do. And if somebody else does it for us, how can we get that satisfaction, that feeling that comes along with the accomplishments of moving through these darker aspects, this RNA, the dark night of the soul, and how is it that we can give up our soul and disregard it as irrelevant? And why are we doing it? Are we even aware spiritually, consciously? Our conscious mind is being given the key to this door that opens into the higher mind without the heart connecting like the rainbow bridge, okay? And yet we're given this from the outside, synthetically modified to open it for us. Then will we not become trapped in this thing called ego mind, in the solar plexus of the world that we saw before? Like I already gave an example, Steve Jobs, who was one of the creators and father of Apple Computer. This is what happens when it doesn't open through the heart, to open up the higher heart and connect with the nervous system and the skeletal system and the brain, the white blood cells, the leukocytes, the bone marrow, and everything else. This is like serious biological connections that we can't be expected for the external to complete us spiritually. And this is going to be the war between enslavement and our own sovereign light of empowerment. Are we giving this away into someone else's way of interpreting our consciousness, our awareness of ourselves, that we are aware of ourselves? And all these feelings that we have are states that the self can tap into, and the breath is the connector. So when we stifle and mask and cover and compromise our breathing, what in fact are we doing? We're disconnecting from our higher self. We're disconnecting from our spirit. And so I can remember in the past how heroin was also one of the culprits, and also fentanyl is another. And so it's not just the drugs, but also the synthetic modifications that we're altering to advance and evolve from, the way our humans are right now into a pristine human, into a Gentile, from the barbaric, and then again, this is a disconnect. So we don't want to do the work because we're too busy trying to earn a living, and in this survival entity of circulation, currency, financial, that has us going around in circles to create an income, a false misrepresentation of our own energy as our currency, that now it wants to take over and do it in the way our body has been able to do it for all these years. We're waking up to it, and rather than wake up to it, we're being, again, falling asleep by external injections into us so that we can go into this metaverse and become avatars, right? Because this is why we're doing it. And so, why breathe at all? So how important is breathing to you? How important is it that you must compromise your breath and breathing? With breath, a profound relaxation response into the parasympathetic nervous system, and without going to sleep, can be made possible. This is how the self can connect to the higher mind. However, for this ascension process to happen, the heart must be open. Even for dissension, into that fear zone. And so, what does this mean anyway? What does this mean for you? Everything that I've described up to now, are you like, in the parallel examples I'm kind of dipping into and expressing verbally? How important is the autonomic nervous system? It's actually very connected to the RNA. Everything is connected, but the autonomic nervous system holds memory and on a very cellular, each and every cell. Okay. And you know, every muscle, every organ, you can recognize it by a different cell type. And so every cell, as we know it biologically, with the exception maybe as they show it in biology of the blood cells, every cell has a nucleus. And as biological animal beings, okay, that we're connected to nature in this way, we're part of the animal kingdom. We don't have a cell wall. As the plants, you know, we say breatharian. Some people just live off sunlight and water, and they become light-bodied beings. Well, the artificial world is recreated of man with technology and artificial intelligence is working on the same goal to have that kind of achievement, but in the other direction, in the inverse of stifling your breath, covering up, and disconnecting from your immune system altogether so that you let something else in to hybridize into this kind of evolution that some have already, through a lot of spiritual work, nutrition, and a lot of other disciplines and meditation, have already managed to make it to those levels called breatharians. And so this is the ultimate goal, the ultimate expression that we're all heading for, and some of us wants to have more power by collecting souls. And that's not the way to do it. Obviously, they're going to come up with their own cell walls that plants have, and we'll just be sitting there with some kind of goggles or whatever, or something's attached to our heads and probably in some kind of liquid form, suspended in some kind of thing like that, where we don't even get physical or do anything, and it's all in the ethereal. But then again, the fourth density, fourth dimensional reality is split into two. And that's what holds the lower density and levels and dimensions of the ethereal into the lower density, the 3D. And then we have the higher. And that is where the splitting of the two worlds begins. And we're at it and going through it right now as we speak. So some of us, without informed consent, are actually believing in the external God or whatever science that's out there and going on that path, and others are not. And they will not be part of their world, and those will not be part of this world. So we are going through the splitting of the worlds right now. And again, another probability can happen where, in between those worlds, the combination of the two to create a third world. And all of these are parallel realities that exist right now, simultaneously. It's all a matter of the collective's awareness that will bring us to that existence, that we come to, agree upon. Yes, this is the playground that we want to play in, and not in the other. See, and this is how it's done. And so, with that said, this is how, with the self can connect to the higher mind. However, for this ascension process to happen, the heart must be open. And then again, it doesn't have to be. It can be in fear mode. It can be part of that a lower density reality and be controlled through artificial means and intelligence, where it's going in accelerated pace right now of reinventing itself and learning from it. Eventually, it will be a robotic system of AI. And yet, there's going to be another world that's biologically and naturally that way from doing all the work. And so, yes, I remember there was even before the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, and now this battle again between the and we're going on, right? How history repeats itself, and how all these little fragmentations of the whole bigger picture is coming together. And so, what reality do you want to be a part of? And do you even know that you have a choice? And so, what are you giving consent to? What are you not standing up for? And so, what does all this mean? The autonomic nervous system holds memory in the muscle, and it does it through feeling and sensing responses similar to an orgasm, But the muscle that we're referring to here mostly is the heart muscle. So taking in and releasing is in resonance to breathing in and out. And so does the blood travel, and from that place where the heart pumps and the oxygen transfers through the many chambers, those 4 chambers, the splitting of the 2, of in and out, through the membrane is this bridge of both worlds. Everything in the body of the self holds memory, and every part must get its turn to release as it regenerates within the present moment from every RNA. The unconscious is what holds the memory, and when properly communicated to cooperate, will release to the subconscious. These messenger RNAs. Okay. The conscious self is the most limiting of all the layers of the mind and the most challenging to deal with. So why not put it back to sleep? So this is what has been going on for, and that sends us right back down into the lowest depths of density. And that can be very, very, well, it's almost like a purgatory when we're placed in suspended in limbo. And so we're in a waiting room and waiting again for our souls to connect with our spirit in a conscious way so that we can do the work. And this is why we're here, to do the work. And when we go to sleep and we're just dealing with the soul world, it can be like tyranny. It's tyranny. And so we fight amongst each other. We have soul contracts. We learn from every soulmate. We reflect and rebound from each other. And so this is how we grow. This is how we learn. This is how we evolve our mortality through procreating and working, enslaving ourselves so that what we've procreated can do better and support and promote and keep that space open for that birth to, continually be of us, that part of us that we leave behind in a false sense of the word mortality, immortality, rather, immortality, like we become immortal. And now we're doing it in a sense where we don't need to procreate anymore. And we can do it instead of all these little divisions and these multiplications. We're going to be in a way of genocide to kind of clear everything up. And this is what's going on. I better not say much more than that. And so, what world do you want to entertain and be a part of? So, the conscious self is the most limiting of all the layers of the mind and the most challenging to deal with. When the self has gone into ascension, the consciousness can become mature enough to accept its integration as enlightened from it. So the subconscious fuses with the conscious mind when the unconscious is open up completely. So by doing that, the unconscious is the unknowable. The subconscious is the unknown. And the conscious is the knowable. So, yes, the heart is the unconscious mind, and at the center of it all is the thymus gland. Also, the given for every other gland, and to consider the natural homeopathy remedies that regulate the self well, and from one most simple basic method to practice, in that all begets from breathing. And the purpose for today is to understand ascension from a physical perspective, the connection to the nervous system, and that it's vital, and just how vital it really is. It will open you up into a world of unimaginable creations. Rather, your imagination will take you there, and your heart will give it wings. The R, the messenger, R and A will provide you with the backing. All you really need, and then your higher mind will open, and that is where it all happens. Right here and now, from standing up and not compromising your breathing abilities, as very simple as every breath you take. Is it of your own doing? Is it being compromised? Are you accepting to consent to the giving of it, each and every breath? Or are you holding back because someone else is telling you to keep your mouth shut? And so it is, this thing called self-expression. Every breath we take. So just breathe that in for a moment. Every breath we take. So I will leave you with these words that I will say out loud, and I will hear them coming as an echo back to me from here and now as you say them. So let's begin. And you can also start to come around now by blinking your eyes, slowly open, and say these words with me. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. Open up to love and face your greatest fear today. Open up to love and face your greatest fear today. I will open up to love and face my greatest fear today. I will open up and face my greatest fear with love today. I will open up to love. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. When I open up to love, I can face the greatest fear the world can throw at me as real. With love, I can open up my imagination and reassemble in the way that I prefer to see. Through that perspective, my state of being and how it feels is the leverage. I will open up to love to face my greatest fear. I will open up to love to face my greatest fear. In a world of only thinking, to face the greatest fear is to open up to love. I will open up to love to face my greatest fear. And thank you for joining me here today. Until next time, hope to see you with this audiovisual version that guides us through the novel, The Sovereign Light, named after my ministry, and this course to take us step by step through ascension into enlightenment, a course in metaphysical spirituality, and not to keep us stuck in a metaverse, rather to learn from the metaphysical and alchemical ways that we may shift and be masters of this ascension process. As masters, ascended into enlightenment. And so with that said, we will explore again further this thing on what is ascension. And day 239, I will see you there.